This is a video answering a question I've gotten from previous videos, where I point out that 40% of the wealth of the American middle class was just stolen by banks on Wall Street, and that most of those bankers were University of Chicago and Harvard MBAs, and that there's a connection that the top colleges in the U.S. have created a vile group of evil people who have essentially ruined the wealth of the American population. And quite possibly destroyed the United States for all of history in their lifetime. That's what we may be seeing, the gridlock now between the right and the left in America. And we may be watching the death of one of the most valuable experiments in history, destroyed by really colleges insinuating themselves in the business from 1900. In 1 century, putting professors in to make them central to business has ruined the growth and the vitality of the American economy. And if you think that professors don't do that, aren't that harmful, in previous videos, I've tried to demonstrate that you were wrong, that they are that harmful. And that there's structural things about professors in general that make them very capable of evil. Read Hannah Arendt's Eichmann in Jerusalem to see the German demonstration of how the worship of meisterhood and expertise transitions into massive evil very, very easily, almost invisibly, so that after the war everybody was shocked because these meisters turned out to be evil, but they were so skillful and at 800 GREs. How could somebody with an 800 GRE be evil? This is, McNamara's video interviews for the last 30 years of his life. He still couldn't figure it out. I'm so good and so brainy. How can a brainy guy be evil? And how can people think that just because I killed a few 100,000, a few million Cambodians, a few 100,000 Vietnamese, I'm evil? That was part, that's part of being in business. You have collateral damage like that, population here, population there. Harvard attitude of collateral damage. Well, anyway, aside from how fun it is to be in a time where you're watching the end of one of the world's most valuable things in history, and I really regret it, as I've said in other videos, the upper levels of management in America, for however evil, if they're Harvard trained, they are, and for however greedy they are, whipping off money to make CEOs, cocaine addictions for their kids. However they are permeable to ideas in a way that no other management is in East Asia or in Europe. And the permeability of upper levels of American management to ideas is terrific. And it's being eroded, again, by the influence of colleges and MBAs. If we could just get the professors out, the permeability to ideas would increase more. So this is a video about all of that stuff. And the question is, how, Richard, can you work in a business school as a professor with all of these negative opinions? I mean, shouldn't professors in business school be the guys only who kiss ass to businessmen and worship them? Isn't that really required to be an effective professor in a business school? You kiss ass to businessmen when you meet them personally and grovel and fawn, and then you worship them as a kind of religion. And then you present little economic equations in your class that invite your students to worship business and businessmen. Now, I say that way because I think there are millions of people out there who are really deluded enough to think that. And that makes sense to them. We don't want someone teaching business who thinks that MBAs are evil and the top 10 colleges are negative influences on business. No, we want somebody who worships the top 10 colleges, worships professorial published unread research, worships equations that leave out humanity to make the math work, who kisses ass to all these big important businessmen who just stole the wealth of the American middle class like Weil at Citibank. That we want people who worship them and, well, you stole $20 trillion. Well, that's just a little collateral damage on the way to a third boat and a cocaine addiction for your kids. I don't think colleges, good colleges, let me put it not good, real colleges, should be about creating evil hordes of people. Now they are, and I mean the evidence is clear, they are. But I don't think they should be that way. And if you think like Henry Mintzberg and Martin at Toronto, like the Canadians, to be honest, if you think that colleges can be better than that, like McGill just quadrupled tuition because their real anti-Harvard MBA program is so popular. If you think that the Canadians are right and the Americans are wrong, then you and I are going to get along. I read Henry Mintzberg's book 20 years ago, that first little tiny book, Structure in Fives, and he was doing very similar stuff to what I was doing, collecting all the varieties of theory out there before he looked at causality. So his mind, and I like the way his mind works. His mind works along some similar rails to the way mine runs. But then he's grown into this anti-Harvard MBA, and the Americans have got it wrong and are ruining themselves in world business with this horrible product from their top 10 colleges. And the Canadians are getting it right. Toronto and McGill, in particular, are getting it right. And then, I was there, and I think some of you are too old to remember, and some of you are too young to remember, but from 1975 to 1990, every business in the world redesigned their philosophy and approach to business and the way they managed processes and how they computerized based off what the Japanese taught them. It wasn't anything from any business school. And I was there. I was alive and thinking, and I watched every day for 15 years. Nobody learned anything about business from any MBA professor. Nothing. Not Milton Friedman, nothing. They learned from the Japanese. They learned how to be horizontal, not vertical. Stop the monkey male hormone crap and be horizontal and serve your customers. And then they computerized not these vertical departments, the kiss up hierarchy that the men love so much because they're monkey animals. And look at the human part and make the computers support the human part, the horizontal part of the business. These cross everything processes. Computerize those instead of computerizing the little kiss-ass silos that men like to organize themselves in. So that was what everybody learned business from for 15 years. And then guess what? At the end of that, in 1990, Harvard decided to create a course on entrepreneurship. Building a business suddenly, after 100 years, it got into the curriculum. I mean, this is 30 years after Silicon Valley changes the world economy. Finally, 30 years later, Christensen, some Mormon guys from Utah, finally get to Harvard and say, we Mormon guys, we're right next door. These guys contributed 8 times more to GDP than you East Coast guys did. Maybe you should put it in your business school. Poor Christensen. He didn't realize that Harvard's about evil money, stealing guys on Wall Street, stealing the money that Silicon Valley makes. That's what they teach. They're not about making the money. No, let the West Coast make the money. We East Coast, we keep stealing it. Poor Christensen. But they took a bunch of Mormons going to Harvard's faculty who were next to Silicon Valley, so they knew. And you've got to understand that cultures get penetrated by different cultures because of things like that, because they hire somebody who happened to live next to something that they would never respect or tolerate or understand, but this Mormon guy lived next to it for his whole life, so he understood it. And then Mormons like to build businesses, and that's just anathema to the MBA programs. So they don't even, can you imagine a program with 90 years they didn't have a course on building a business? Really, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making this up, folks. So how can I be a business professor if I am so negative about what Harvard is and what top colleges generate? Well, because for one thing, give me a break. I've managed in businesses. 7 global corporations: Matsushita Electric, Sekisui Chemical, EDS, Coopers & Lybrand, Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, NV Philips, and Thomson Electric Paris. So I know the practical side, and I had a stellar career. I met the CEO. I entered all these companies with low-level jobs and got promoted 20 ranks in 3 years and met the CEO every single year in every single company personally, face-to-face. And he gave me buildings and more money and more budget and more headcount, and told me in 2 weeks to go send him a report on what I was going to do with the extra resources. So I knew the practical side of building businesses. And then I taught at the University of Chicago Graduate School of Business, the heart of the beast, Milton Friedman worship, the Nazi lunchroom. Really, people who were already right. Rush Limbaugh's radio program was the intellectual level of the lunchroom there. You had these Nobel Prize winners talking like some bigot from rural Alabama. It was unintellectual and embarrassing for a great university like Chicago. Fortunately, Chicago's got 20 other departments that are still Hutchinson-esque and deeply in this putting pillars of European history into the shallow American culture and uplifting the banality of American life as delineated by de Tocqueville. So you still have that dream alive at all the other departments of Chicago. But the business school of Chicago has been captured by a political clique. And they now sprinkle that clique of right-wing guys with Thaler and a few behavioral economists to make it publicly acceptable and to avoid having to apologize for what they did to the world economy from 1980 to 2000. So how can I teach when I don't kiss up, when I don't worship Milton Friedman, and I don't worship the top 10 business schools, and I don't think their research is impressive, and I think that people impressive it don't understand correlational statistics very well, and the low criteria of editors of journals. Medicine, which is a higher standard because the bad results that they publish kills people, have editors of their journals that do understand a little advanced statistics a little bit. And you'll see them rejecting correlational studies at the business journals, except because they can't afford to have dead patients as a result of the correlational fallacies that are publishable in business because it's just shampoo. So how can I? Well, look, Canada does it in Toronto and McGill. In a dramatic way, McGill quadrupled tuition last year. They were so popular in their anti-Harvard MBA program. They create leaders instead of thieves. It's that simple. If I had their brochure, that's what I'd put on the top. He says managers, not MBAs. I think that's a euphemism. He really means leaders, not thieves. And so the Canadians, once again, they got the healthcare thing right. They got the gun thing right. And they don't kill each other. And they created a culture of care among each other. And then, boom, they got the business school thing right. So global warming is coming, and if you got a brain, move north. Except for the maple syrup stuff.